Hello, Warhammer YouTubers. It's Hooves of Doom, and welcome back to another video. This is about designing my Free Guild army. So it's about the process in which I create the Free Guild in AoS, and this is one of my current hobby projects to work on the Free Guild and to paint what I have. I've actually only played like one game of Empire during 8th with my rather small kind of current force of Free Guild. And so I consulted with Paul Conti. He has a channel that's largely devoted towards free people for the most part, and so he's kind of the resident expert. And so I consulted him just to kind of get his idea on some of the pros and cons of different units. I had watched a number of his videos in the past too, so I mean, I had some sense. I know, for example, that they can stack a lot of buffs and things like that. But looking at the actual specifics was a kind of a different perspective in actually designing your own army. So Paul gave me lots of advice, but I also kind of like to design an army that fits me personally. So my general design philosophy for an army is to create an army that is cool first and foremost, but is also somewhat effective, right? So I aim for match play, but kind of with an open and narrative play in mind, right? That in some ways should be like my personal motto. So a good balance of both the army appearance and things that I think would be interesting to play with, but also things that are half decent in the game. That's kind of the goal, that balance between both. If the army is really cool looking, but it's terrible in the game, I don't know if that's necessarily the best method. But if it happens to be cool, but is also very effective, obviously that's great. So I happen to have enough free guild units to make a couple different lists, and I like to try different compositions in games. So I'm buying some new units now to create my plan list that I'll discuss later in this video. But if I were to use them in a battle report, I might switch things up now and then and use different compositions and different lists. Most of my games are very casual, so I'm not too worried about having like the absolute maxed out list possible. I'm designing a list that I think, is somewhat competitive, but also just really interesting and cool and somewhat unique. After all, the way I kind of see it in some ways is I have a variety of different armies. So if the Free Guild army, as it currently stands, is not so great, after playing it, a number of times, I can just change out and play with a different army. So regardless of my army design, the entire collection of Free Guild that I own, plus the ones I will be buying, will be painted before moving on to the next project. I know Mrs. Hooves is a little bit skeptical since I'm buying more models, but I can assure you and her that they will be painted. Finally, because the nature of hobby projects, in the way that I view hobby projects, my army design will focus purely on a single faction. So I'm only sticking to units that are considered Free Guild in the Grand Alliance, right? So if you have that Grand Alliance books, it's only those units. I'm not going to take, the other Empire units that were once under that larger umbrella. It's purely going to be Free Guild. But as I paint more things, going forward, maybe, I don't have a problem with combining, mixing, matching lists in the future. But for now, I just want to stick and create as best I can an interesting and enjoyable Free Guild army. But if I were to return to the Free Guild at some point in the future, then I probably would buy some of the older units that are no longer being supported, or things that just kind of add on to this that are part of the Empire Compendium currently. So let's take a look at the War Scrolls. So I'm not intending this to be a super comprehensive look at the pros and cons of each scroll. I'm just kind of going through each of the units that I could possibly use in the army, and maybe look at why I think they're half decent or not so much. And again, a lot of this comes with my conversations with Paul. So first off, the Free Guild General on Griffin. I happen to own this model. I'll talk about the models in the upcoming video where I kind of go through the collection, and I'll also discuss like paint schemes and things like that. So the Free Guild General and Griffin I probably will include, and It has a kind of a decent profile. Now I'm using like the older model, and it has uh, like a regular hammer. Um, so that's the profile. So I'm going to use the rune sword profile, which is a decent amount of attacks, 3 plus 5 plus, neg 1 rend, 1 damage. And then the griffin itself is actually half decent, has a deadly beak, 2 attacks, 3 up, neg 2, and then d6 damage if it's undamaged, if hasn't taken any wounds yet. And then the razor claws, it gets half a dozen attacks, hits on a 4, wounds on 3, neg 1 rend, 2 damage. It's a half decent profile for a kind of a monster. He has my model has the Freeguild shield, which will give him a 3+ save, which on a big monster, a 3+ save is actually half decent. And the Griffin itself has the piercing blood roar. In the battle shock phase, a Griffin can loose a piercing blood roar at the unit within 8 inches. If it does, that unit must roll 2 dice and use the highest result if it has to take a battle shock test that phase. That's actually a half decent ability, mostly because you can target a specific unit. And I think that you can if something's been hurt and you really want to get rid of it, if there's only certain units can kind of get immune to battle shock. Generally speaking, you can put it on like an individual unit through the generic command ability like Inspiring Presence. But this way, if you're in combat with 2 units, you could select the other one, or just kind of ensure that if the opponent does need to take battle shock, there's a good chance that it'll or increased amount of chance, and plus it has a range too, so it doesn't necessarily need to be in the combat involved with the Griffin itself, which is kind of interesting. So the rousing battle cry. If the Free Guild General on Griffin uses this ability, pick a Free People's unit within 15 inches. Until your next hero phase, you can add 2 to that unit's bravery and 1 to its charge rolls and hit rolls. It's not bad. It's more if you're going after the opponent, you're moving towards them, and you really want to get in there and attack. It could be okay. Paul doesn't ever use this guy as the general, which I thought was kind of interesting. And then we have the generic Free Guild General. You can have him on foot or on horse. You can have the banner. Let me just talk about the Stately War Banner. It's a totem. You roll 2 dice and choose the lowest when taking battle shock tests for Free People's units that are from your army within 24 inches of a Stately War Banner. That's actually not too bad, and the reason I kind of say that, like on its own, it's not great, but a lot of the Free People's units, if they have a banner, then their ability is if you roll for battle shock and you roll 1, they don't take any casualties at all. I guess it's only good if you've taken a lot of casualties, but if you take them within the Free Guild Regiment, which is one of the battalions, then it's a 1 or 2, and I guess in that case, if on a 1 or 2 you just ignore battle shock, if you have the Stately War Banner and you're rolling 2 dice and taking the lowest, there's a good chance it's going to be 1 or 2. So it can help this army be somewhat immune to battle shock. It's not exactly 100%, but it's half decent. But I probably won't use it in my army design. Like in most cases, if you have an option to have it on foot or on the warhorse seems to make more sense. You get more attacks. It moves faster. I have a couple older models, which I'll discuss in the future video. But then he has an interesting command ability. If a Free Guild General uses this ability, pick up to 3 Free People's units within 15 inches. These units cannot move or charge during that turn, but you can add 1 to all hit rolls and wound rolls for them until your next hero phase. So again, you can't move out against the enemy and charge in and then get this bonus. It needs to already be a combat that is already ongoing. Or I think more applicable are units that are ranged, that are not going to move, and you can basically guarantee that they're still in range, and so on and so forth. So This is a good ability to stack with like the handgunners, and this is the Paul always uses this guy as his general, and I can kind of see why. Initially, I was like, oh man, really? I didn't really quite understand the reasoning, but like if you can get, you know, 2 or 3 big units of handgunners with the +1 to hit, +1 to wound, they're going to deal a lot of damage. And then we got Free Guild archers here. Oh, and that Free Guild general can also get the, um, if it's equipped with a shield, it's a 3-up, which is again a decent profile for a character. Not too many characters get the 3-up, and you know his attacks are half decent. You know they're average. So the actual Free Guild archers here, they get 1 attack, 4+4+, and then they get the additional movement through Huntsman, and then ordered volleys. You can reroll hit rolls of 1 for Free Guild archers in the shooting phase. You can reroll hit rolls of 1 or 2 instead if the unit is larger, so it's a little bit more accurate. But without rend, and the wound is a little bit low as well. So they're okay. I'm not gonna harp on them or something, but they're probably not my personal choice. And then we got Free Guild Guard. These are kind of like the old Empire State troops. So you got militia weapons. Yeah, I forget what was the benefit of having militia weapons. There was something. Oh, that's right. They're the ones with like the ranged attack. They get militia weapons in close combat, but then they also get the ranged missile weapons. And then you get the halberds. They get a -1 rend, which is half decent, but only 1-inch range. And then the spear, which is basically just more attacks. So that they get increased range, but nothing extra special. I think the swords, in my opinion, are probably one of the best ones. Ironically, one of the interesting things here, from a modeling kind of standpoint, is that the halberds can have shields, which is a little bit weird because they never. I don't think they ever had those in Empire. It was kind of like you get the halberd or nothing. Maybe you could switch out and get hand weapon and shield or something. But um, so I know Paul always likes the sword and shield combo, simply because you can reroll save rolls of 1, and then if they have the sword, then they get +1. So that makes them comparable to a Stormcast for all intents and purposes. Um, they're 1 wound apiece, but they have the same amount of armor save and same protection, and not quite as offensive. They're not the 3+ to wound, but still half decent, and they're kind of smaller, so you can get more attacks in. But in general, a semi-reliable, decent unit, and it's like 80 points for 10. So they're actually not too bad. And then you get the Free Guild Greatswords, which are a fantastic unit. It's kind of like the elite troops of the Free Guild. They get their big 2-handed sword, 1-inch range, 2 attacks each, which is great. 4+, 3+, -1 rend, 1 damage. So if a unit of greatswords is within 14 inches of a Free People's hero from your army, when they attack, you can add 1 to all their hit rolls. So that basically, you can largely guarantee, depending on where you place them, that they're going to hit on 3s, wound on 3s, which kind of moves them up to a lot of the other really good elite troops. But of course, because they're Free People, you can stack additional hits and wounds. For instance, if you're in combat and use the Free Guild a general's command ability of +1 wound, +1 to hit, then they're 2+2+, which is obviously amazing. And there's a numerous amount of things that in the Free Guild army or the Free People's army that you can get to a 2+ to hit very easily. And a lot of these are simply Free People, so you can combine this. I'm being very restricted by saying I just want to use Free Guild and not generic Free Peoples, but you can definitely mix and match it, a lot of different combos. And then you got the old Outriders. They got a repeater handgun, 14-inch range, D3 attacks, 5 plus to hit, 3 plus to wound, -1, 1 damage. And you can take brace of pistols and the grade launching blunderbuss as well. Um, they're kind of an interesting um, kind of unit. I actually really like these. I just like the look of them. I like the idea of like a skirmish cavalry that kind of moves up and shoots if something's in combat. You can add 1 to the hit rolls for Outriders in the shooting phase if they did not move in their preceding movement phase, and if there are no enemy models within 3 inches. So, under the right circumstances, you can get them through hitting on 4s, wounding on 3s, which is a decent. And then the sharpshooter equipped with a repeater pistol, who's like the unit champion, gets 3 attacks instead of 2. And the trumpeters is kind of an important thing in this unit too. If you have any trumpeters, you can shoot and charge in the turn, even if it ran during the movement phase. I don't think you're going to get a lot of charges off of these guys, though. They just don't have the armor to really, maybe if it's like a lone wizard or something, why not? But for the most part, you're not going to be charging this into a bigger unit. And then you have the pistoliers, which are kind of like the other skirmish cavalry unit. Similar profile. They can also take brace of pistols. I think their biggest difference here is reckless riders. So when the unit runs, roll 2 dice and pick the highest instead of rolling a single dice when determining how much extra they move. So they can run a bit faster. However, when pistolers run, they must run as close as possible towards the enemy nearest visible enemy unit. Um, so they can run fast, but they have to move towards the enemy, which is, towards even the nearest enemy. You might not necessarily want to go that direction. So they retain that little bit of element of being a little bit too ambitious to kind of get in combat, a little bit too. They're not as concerned with their own personal well-being, I guess. So I think the Outriders are kind of a stronger choice. I do like the look of them with their individual pistols. If I expand the Freeguild army at some point, I'd pick up a unit just for entertainment purposes, just for fun. But it's probably not something I'd be too interested in doing. And then you got the Freeguild crossbowmen, which are 1 attack, 4 plus to hit, 4 plus to wound, 20 inches. Each from piercing bolts. Each time you roll a wound of 6 or more from a crossbow, that attacks result at -1 rend instead of 0. Which on its own is not that great. But if you have 20 or more, they can shoot twice if they did not move in their preceding movement phase. So, if you're shooting twice and you roll 6 to wound, well, it's still, I don't think, particularly too great. But, it's okay. And then you got the Freeguild handgunners. Now, I happen to own a bunch of these, so this is probably what I'll be using mostly for my ranged. I can't see myself picking up the crossbowmen or the archers. But I do have a bunch of these. And so the range is a bit lower than like the crossbow at 16 inches, 1 attack, 5 plus to hit, 3 plus to wound, -1 rend, 1 damage. But you got some good perks here. You can add 1 to the hit rolls for a Freeguild handgunner if you're shooting phase, as long as they did not move. So, and there's no enemies within 3 inches. So if you don't move, then you're hitting on 4s. And if you have 20 or more models, then you're going to hit on 3s. And so this is where if you add the command ability in, then you can hit on 2s and wound on 2s. So, I'll probably run units of 20. So if they get that magic kind of, something in range, they haven't moved, they're not damaged, you get the command ability off, then you get a lot of shots, 1 per piece, but I'll probably use units of 20 that are hitting on 2s, wounding on 2s, -1 rend, which is really nice. And then the pipers, I think, is kind of a very nice little musician ability. Once per turn, if an enemy unit ends its charge within 3 inches of the unit. That includes any pipers. They can stand and shoot. Each model can then shoot its missile at the charging unit. So again, you get that ability. If you don't move, you get all these bonuses. You know, you can shoot during your movement phase. Maybe they move up and they charge you, and you get to shoot again, which is obviously really, really nice. And so there's one last unit in the army, and that is Demigryph Knights. Now the regular knights have been removed. Um, you know, the old empire used to have a variety of different armored knights. The only thing that's now remaining is just in the current Grand Alliance book, right? You can still use the old Empire compendium and use those knights. There's no problem with that. But for the purposes of this, the Free Guild, it's strictly the Demigryph Knights. Now these are more buffed up armored cavalry than regular knights, but they're not obviously not on the same level as a Stormcast Extremis or something like that. But I still think they're half decent. So they have a decent number of wounds, a decent armor save, and a decent move. It's not particularly fast, but they're also armored cavalry. So 2-inch range of lance and sword, 2 attacks, 4 up, no rend, 1 damage. Cavalry halberd is 2-inch range, 2 attacks, 4 up, 3 up, 1 damage. And then the Demigryph's razor sharp talons, 3 attacks, 4 up, 3 up, -1 rend, 1 damage. Now, if you have the units with the shields, which they all will, and I don't think there's an option where you don't, you get to reroll saves of 1. So that that makes them. I'm not going to say it's fantastic, but they have some durability, especially having twice as many wounds as a regular cavalry unit. And then if they charge in with the lance, you get add 1 to the wound rolls and damage for this unit's lances and swords if it's charged. So the cavalry halberd, it gets a generic 3+ to wound all the time. The lance and sword get the 3+ to wound if they charge, or only if they charge. But if they do charge, then they get the 3+ to wound, and then they're doing 2 damage. I think that they're mostly a shock unit, especially with the range and the movement and the armor and wounds. You want to be somewhat more aggressive with these. So I think I know talking to Paul that he normally uses the lance and sword. And that kind of makes more sense to me. And then the Demigryphs, if a wound roll for Demigryphs razor sharp talons is a 6 or more, then that attack inflicts D3 damage. So I mean, it doesn't have a lot of rend, but if you can pump out enough attacks, right? Each is getting a decent amount of attacks per Demigryph. You have units of 3. I like them. I like the look of them. I think that they're an interesting unit, and I plan on using them quite a bit. So let's take a look at the battalions. So in general, there is one principal battalion in the Grand Alliance order book called the Freeguild Regiment. And they have an ability where you get to stand together, fight together. The warriors in the battalion are trained to fight together to overcome their foes. You can add 1 to all hit rolls for a unit in a Freeguild regiment if it is within 6 inches of another unit from the regiment when the attack rolls are made. I can see this being somewhat useful because you have so many units in this organization that they're going to be clumped together. You're almost regularly going to get that +1 to hit. And then the regimental discipline is what I was mentioning earlier with the stately war banner, where units in the Free Guild have a +1 to bravery if you're within 10 inches of the Free Guild general. In addition, if you roll 1 when taking battle shock tests for a unit from a Free Guild regiment, no models flee. If that unit includes any standard bearers, and most will, then it's a 1 or 2. Because as I said, if you have a standard bearer, then they get that 1 anyways. Yeah, I mean it's okay. I think that the by far the biggest downside of this is the fact that you need so many units to fill it out. I'm always confused by the fact that when they make these type of battalions, and it's like you need a ton of models to do. So you can either use the Freeguild General on foot or on the Griffin, 1 unit of Demigryph Knights, 1 unit of Freeguild Greatswords, 3 units of Freeguild Guard, 3 units of either archers, crossbowmen, or handgunners, 1 unit of outriders, 1 unit of pistoliers. It's a lot of models. Um, I think in the right balance, right, it could be half decent if you use like a lot of great swords, like one big unit of demigryphs or something. If they're all getting that +1 somehow, you can make it potentially okay. Um, I actually have most of the units to fill this out, so I might use this at some point just for fun. But I don't think it's going to be my regular one. Now, when I actually talked to Paul, this was kind of like, hey, should I be using this? What do you think of this? And I don't think he had a particularly good opinion of it. Instead, he pointed to the Empire Compendium page, which has two different battalions. Now, the first one is the State Trooper Detachment. It has the exact same rules as the Free Guild Regiment. It's like the mini version of it where you don't need quite as much stuff, which is kind of funny. Maybe it might be actually somewhat useful to go with that as a smaller one. Now that I think of it, looking at it, that might be true. Um, so maybe, yeah, because I mean, my army, which you'll see in a minute, already does have. Uh, uh, yeah, actually, I could fit this in with no problem because I'm actually taking all these units. So why wouldn't I just take the state troop detachment in addition and get that +1 to hit naturally? That would actually really help out the handgunners even more. Um, Interesting. Okay, I'll have to consider that. And then the thing that he really pointed towards though was the Brotherhood of Knights. Oh, but you do need to pay points for the state troop detachment. I don't know if I have the points for it. Either case, I'll think about that some more. So he pointed towards the Brotherhood of Knights, which he's been using. So they have glorious charge. When a Brotherhood Knights charge into battle, the ground shakes with the thundering hooves. I already like this one. Only the most foolish would stand before them. Models from the Brotherhood of Knights make one extra attack with each of their melee weapons if they charge that turn. A Brotherhood of Knights is composed of the bravest warriors, all of whom have sworn to uphold the honor of their order. All models in the battalion have +1 bravery. Now you do need, a decent amount of units of Empire Knights or Demigryph Knights. I know Paul, I think, is using, I think he said 2 units of Demigryph Knights and then 2 units of regular Empire Knights. Um, I don't have any, I only, as you'll see when I go over my models, I don't have um, any Empire Knights. I do have some Demigryph Knights now, and I think I'm going to go more Demigryph. So I'm thinking of doing this formation with all Demigryph Knights. That's what I'm thinking. Because I think it would look cool. That's a lot of Demigryphs. Um, and then the riders have 3 attacks, and the Demigryph itself gets it has 3, so +1 for 4. So that it bumps them up. So I think this formation's 80 points. For that 80 points, I get an additional 24 attacks out of my Demigryphs, which is a decent bonus, definitely. I'll have to put some thought into that state troop detachment, though. I don't know. We'll see. So, after consulting in the General's Handbook, that troop regiment that I was looking at, it's 120 points. I don't think I'm going to go with that. Maybe if I expand the army out a bit more, certainly maybe add it in if I was playing a bit higher point value, that type of thing. And I certainly have the extra models, so this is not my entire collection, and I'm actually buying a couple models to make this army work. But I think it would be interesting and unique and kind of just a real joy to play on the battlefield. I think, right? Right now it's all speculative, but maybe I get in the game and the demigriffs are absolutely horrible. But I think they'll be fun and interesting, and I like the idea of all these birds in the army. Because with the Knightly Brotherhood, which is 80 points, and then the Demigriff Knights, so there's a total of 12 of those, and then the Free Guild General and the Griffin too, right, kind of in the middle. Lots of birds, that's kind of my hammer kind of component of the army. 880 points for all those Demigriff Knights. It's probably too much, really, but that's all right. I think it would look cool. I'm really, honestly, I think this is going to be to actually play kind of a real joy, and hopefully I don't just get annihilated or something. But I won't really know until I'm playing. But I'll be happy to have this as part of my collection. I think the army will just look really cool. And then I'm taking for the non-battalion choices, like I said, the Free Guild General and Griffin, simply because like it's a monster. I think you should always have like a couple bigger units in the army, just for fun's sake. Like I said, as I went over the stats, I think it's a half decent kind of unit in terms of the damage it could potentially put out, and if I can make opponents run through the battle shock phase with that a shriek that the Griffin lifts off, that'd be good. But I'm also going to take the Free Guild General on Warhorse and use him, I think, for the most part as a general. And this is, again, on the advice of Paul Conti. So even if the Knightly Brotherhood, I know Paul, used half and half of Empire Knights, and as he said, they have specific different roles and their different point costs. It would be cheaper to use some Empire Knights. I totally get it's probably the smarter move, but I just think it'd be cool to use a bunch of Demigriff Knights. So then I'm using 2 units of Free Guild Guard with swords and shields. Use these guys to kind of move on to different points of the battlefield that I want to hold. They're cheap, right? 80 points each, 10 models in each. I can just put them right in front of the handgunners, right, and just use them as like a screen. Or if the opponent wants to charge, well, then they've got to kind of get through those first. And then behind them are 2 units of 20 hand gunners. So that's a lot of lead it could kind of pump out, right? If they get anywhere close to like the 3+ or 2+ to hit or 2+ to wound, whew, man, that's going to be nice. And then I have 1 unit of Free Guild Outriders. I just love them. I just think they're cool. They're probably not necessarily the best, but they're kind of like a little bit. It's only a small amount of them, but they're kind of like the elite handgunners insofar as they're faster. They have potential to shoot more, and so on and so forth. What I like about the army and what I'm kind of envisioning here is it has 2 potential styles of play where you can either go after the opponent with the Demigriff Knights and the General and Griffin. In behind them support are the Outriders, and then you have a decent amount of infantry that's kind of waiting at the back, kind of moving up in support. And you can move quickly across the battlefield with one component while the other side acts as an anchor and make sure that you control the other half. Or you can play a little bit like if your opponent's going to move towards you, you can put up a couple screens, maybe use the Demigriff Knights as kind of like a giant wall or something like that, and just have the handgunners right behind. And so if they charge in, okay, maybe they kill a bunch of Demigriffs, but then the handgunners are just going to do some massive damage on them. And even though I might use the Free Guild General and Warhorse more often than not, if I want to go at the enemy, if I think, okay, I need to get over there, I need to do combat, I need to get onto their edge of the table or whatnot, and really get in there and do a lot of stuff, then I might elect for that the Free Guild General and Griffin, because that way the Demigriff Knights with the command ability really they can charge a little bit further, and they get +1 to hit. So I can kind of go either way, because the Free Guild on Warhorse is probably generally going to be buffing the handgunners and outriders, and the Free Guild on Griffin would be buffing the Demigryph Knights. So I think there's two possible ways to use this army. I don't know. I just think it's a cool army. I came up with it, and I told Paul, this is what I'm thinking, and he seemed to think it would be an interesting army to play with as well. So I'll give it a shot. I'm going to design this army and buy the necessary models and paint it up and start playing with this. And like I said, I do have a lot of other Free Guild units. Like I have some spearmen and things which I'll go into in a future video, but so there's a lot of things that I could switch in and out if I wanted, or expand the army. So as it is, it's just shy of 80 models, 1980 points. So stay tuned for the video where I'm going to go through the models and talk about the different paint schemes I'm thinking of doing. Thanks for tuning in, and have a good one. Bye.